Meanwhile, back at the city, a few hours have passed by, and Eric, who is asleep and leaning against the wall, wakes up. He shakes his head and notices Twinkle is breathing deeply as he sits in a meditative manner in the middle of the room facing the door. Tara's asleep on the floor led next to Twinkle. Claudia and Matthew are sleeping and led against each other on the wall, sharing a blanket, and Michael is led down under a blanket next to Eric. Eric nudges Michael and wakes him up. Michael wakes up with a jump and looks round and looks at Eric. Eric then quietly says, "Look at Twinkle." Michael frowns, still half asleep, and looks over his shoulder at Twinkle. Eric then says, "Who does he remind you of?" Michael's eyes widen as he turns around to face Twinkle and says, "Hey, is he asleep? He is sat just like Tim and the other children Sam looks after." Eric nods his head, then suddenly Twinkle twitches and leaps to his feet. "Huh?" says Michael. Twinkle growls and picks up his huge gun. Tara begins to stir, then Twinkle runs out the room and Tara wakes up. She sits up and looks around and says, "Huh? What's going on?" Eric replies, "It's Twinkle. He just leapt up and growled and run off." Tara then exclaims, "What?" Tara gets to her feet and picks up one of the army guns. She limps out of the room and can see Twinkle facing down the tunnel from which they came and pointing the large gun in the direction of the tunnel and growling. Tara approaches Twinkle and looks up at him and softly says, "Hey there, big guy. What is it?" The rest of the group emerge, each carrying an army gun. Claudia speaks. "What's going on?" Tara replies, "I dunno, it's Twinkle, he..." Then suddenly, Twinkle picks up Tara with one hand whilst holding a large gun under his other arm. Tara says, "Whoa, Twinkle, what's wrong?" Tara holds on to Twinkle best she can as he hastily turns and runs down the subway tunnel to his left. Matthew says, as he powers up a torch, "Hey, wait up!" As he begins to run after Twinkle. The others join him and the group run through the subway following Twinkle. Matthew says, "Jesus, I wish he could speak." Claudia says, "Well, something spooked him." Eric then says, "He probably sensed something, or someone." The group follow Twinkle as he negotiates the tunnel. They get to a subway station and Twinkle leaps up onto the platform. They slowly and cautiously walk through the station till they get to a room where a flight of steps leads up to a darkened street above. Moonlit can be seen cascading down the steps. Twinkle then stops, turns around and walks up to Matthew and places his hand over the torch Matthew is holding, blocking out the light. As he does, Matthew looks up at him and Tara whispers, "Turn it off." Twinkle places down Tara gently and puts his finger on his lips to signal to be quiet. Twinkle then sneaks towards a flight of steps, slowly followed by the others. At the top of the steps stood two army soldiers in their dark blue suits of armour and helmets, with their backs to the subway entrance. Not one part of their body or face was exposed due to this armoured suit, not even a part of their head or face visible, and was covered by a helmet with black goggles and antenna of sorts to the left side of the helmet. The armour seemed to be of a type of plastic material and slightly reflective. As Twinkle and the others sneak up the stairs behind the two soldiers, one of the soldiers' radios goes off, and a voice speaks. "Checkpoints 2, 3, 5, and 7. Stay at your positions and be alert. Make sure nothing leaves the subways. We have a few bodies down here and evidence of a gunfight. It looks like they were killed not too long ago, so stay alert. Over." The soldiers look at one another, and then one looks over his shoulder. He notices Twinkle's huge frame behind him on the stairs. The soldier goes to speak. "Huh? What the..." Twinkle leaps up the stairs at the soldiers and grabs their heads from above with his giant three-fingered and thumbed hands. Snap! Crack! Twinkle twists his wrists at great speed before the soldiers can do anything, breaking their necks, killing them instantly. Twinkle rushes into the alleyway, dragging the two soldiers by their heads, quickly followed by the others. The group leave the subway stairs, checking their surroundings as they run to Twinkle. They get to Twinkle, and he throws the bodies of the soldiers at Michael and Matthew's feet, then flicks his head at them, then runs off to the subway to get the large gun. Matthew nudges the soldier at his feet with his foot. Eric then says quietly, "Government dome soldiers." Tara whispers, "I bet the whole city is riddled with them." Claudia whispers, "How are we going to get out?" Twinkle gets back to the alley with the giant armoured vehicle gun and kneels down with his back to the group, facing the street. Matthew whispers to Michael, "Michael!" Matthew kneels down as Michael looks at him. Matthew then begins to examine one of the soldiers' suits of armour. Eric says to Matthew, "What are you doing?" Matthew replies, "These soldiers' suits look as though they will fit me and Michael." Matthew begins to take the armour off the dead soldiers. Michael replies, "Yeah, and?" Matthew then quietly says, Well, if we put the suits on, we can walk through the city unnoticed. We can find a vehicle and get the hell out of the city. Eric speaks quietly. Very well, Matthew, but a lot of the working vehicles have probably already been used to escape the city. Matthew replies, well, do you have any better ideas? Matthew begins to put on the soldier's boots and armour as Tara says, sounds good to me. We'll wait in the building, okay, Matthew? Matthew replies, okay, we'll come get you. Eric, Tara, Claudia and Twinkle run down the alleyway looking for an entrance into the building. As Michael finishes putting on his face armoured helmet on, Matthew hides dead soldiers' bodies, then picks up an army gun. Matthew walks to the end of the alleyway and looks around the streets. Michael is stood behind him holding the gun also. Matthew speaks. Right, it's clear. Now Michael, be cool, be calm. The last thing we need is to draw attention, okay? Michael nervously replies, okay. The couple leave the alleyway and walk along the street across the road. Then suddenly behind them, some distance down the street, a person runs out of an alleyway chased by two soldiers. Michael and Matthew turn to face the commotion, then gunfire is heard, as the soldiers unmercifully shoot down the fleeing man. The soldiers run over to the body of the man and kick him to see if he is dead, and shoot him again as he is on the floor. Mike utters, devils! One of the soldiers notices Mike and Matthew and waves to them. Damn, says Michael. Matthew says, stay cool, just stay calm, just wave back. Michael and Matthew wave back to the soldiers, and the soldiers then face the body again and begin to search it. Then a strange noise can be heard coming from behind Matthew and Michael. Huh? Michael says. The couple turn to face the whooshing buzzing noise to see building walls to their left being illuminated by searchlights. The noise gets louder as a flying craft emerges from around the corner. The aircraft has 3 searchlights attached to the front and sides of a horizontally oval section. This section has a blacked out windscreen above the lights, and below the lights of the underside of this section is a large gun similar to that of what Twinkle has in his possession. This overall section is connected by a thinner column to a larger horizontally rectangular section that has vertically rotatable wings with fan-like propellers horizontally inside them. The object is partially illuminated by various flashing lights all over its hull. The craft glides spookily through the air and turns to face Matthew and Michael as it shines its lights all over the buildings and surrounding area. It shines a light down on Matthew and Michael, then flies off overhead towards the direction of the 2 soldiers inspecting the body. Matthew speaks. Come on, let's get out of here. Matthew and Michael jog down the street and from around the corner from where the flying machine came from. Michael says, what the hell was that? Matthew replies, I don't know and I don't want to. Come on. The group continue to go down the street when suddenly crash. A rubbish can topples as a young boy runs out in front of them and runs across the road. Michael shouts out, hey kid, wait! The boy runs off down the alleyway and Michael chases after him. Matthew calls out to Michael, Michael, no! The young child, petrified, continues to run down a maze of alleyways. The boy goes to turn and run down an alleyway and stops and turns and runs in the opposite direction. Michael continues to chase the boy as Matthew stops and looks down the alleyway which the boy refused to run down. Matthew sees a 2-legged large machine with its back to him, stood motionless at the end of the alleyway. Matthew then turns to see Michael disappearing down the alleyway as he is chasing the boy. Damn, says Matthew. He then begins to chase Michael again. The boy leaves the alleyway and runs out into the street. Suddenly there is a great whooshing and whirring noise, and the boy stops in his tracks, covering his face as he is illuminated from a beam of light from above him and in front of him. Michael stops at the edge of the alleyway to see a flying machine him and Matthew saw earlier hovering above the streets, pointing its light at the boy. Matthew catches up and comes to a halt behind Michael. Shoot! Matthew says as he looks at the boy, who is still stood in the street covering his face from the beam of light of the hovering craft. Michael then notices a huge gun attached beneath the craft begins to turn to face the direction of the boy. No! Michael screams and scrambles with the gun's controls, firing a burst of bullets at the flying machine, then a small rocket, which hits the machine and destroys one of its searchlights. The machine jerks and shudders as its engine whines as it turns to face Michael and Matthew. Its beaming searchlights shine on the pair of them. Once the lights shine off of the boy, he stumbles and runs off down a wide alleyway. The lights of the flying machine zoom back to the boy's previous position in the street, but he is gone. The craft's light then turn back to face Michael and Matthew's position, then a high-pitched beep comes from the machine loudspeaker, and a voice echoes from the flying machine speaker. What the hell are you doing? Matthew goes to speak to Michael. What the hell do we do now? The voice from the speaker shouts again, Identify yourselves! Matthew and Michael walk out from the alleyway into the streets as the flying machine lights track their movements. Then, clunk, 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 clunk. The 2-legged machine Matthew spotted moments ago approaches a group. The walking machine has a similar look to the flying machine but is narrower, smaller and has legs placed where the flying machine has wings. It too has a blacked out windshield with a large gun underneath its hull. The walking machine, although smaller than the flying machine, still towers over Matthew and Michael. The voice comes from a speaker from the walking robot. "What's going on here?" The voice from the flying machine replies, "These two idiots shot us as we were engaging a target." The robot pilot replies, "What?" Michael shrugs his shoulders and says, "My gun slipped when I was running." The robot pilot speaks again. "Where is the target now?" The flying machine pilot replies, "It got away, that way, it ran down the alley." The flying machine then shines a light down the alley where the boy ran to. The robot pilot speaks again, "Right," and with that the robot turns and walks down the alleyway. Then the flying machine lights beam down on Michael and Matthew again. Then the flying machine pilot speaks yet again. "Well, you two, you haven't identified yourselves." Matthew nudges Michael and whispers, "Shoot, now what?" The flying machine pilot voice shouts from the speaker, "What do you mean, shoot, now what?" Michael whispers, "I think he can hear us." The pilot replies, "Of course I can hear you. Your proximity radio is on. Who the hell are you two? What troop unit are you with?" Michael and Matthew are frozen on the spot, not knowing what to do or say, when suddenly a large armoured troop carrier with a huge gun on caterpillar tracks trundles at speed around the corner and comes to a halt next to Michael and Matthew. The flying machine shines one of its lights on the vehicle. A soldier gets out of the door at the front of the side of the vehicle, and the back doors also swing open. The soldier holding his gun runs over to Michael and Matthew and says, "You two, get in the jeep."